The oncologist spoke in that careful, steady way doctors learn for delivering news that reshapes a life. Stage 2. Treatable. But time was critical. Surgery first, then chemo. The copay alone was $3,200, due before they could even book the operating room. He slid a folder across the desk and waited. I was 67, 31 years teaching high school history in Dayton, Ohio. Retired on a teacher's pension that covered my small mortgage, utilities, groceries, and little else. I'd raised 2 kids alone after my wife died, worked summers, coached JV baseball for 12 years, tutored on weekends. I knew exactly what $3,200 meant on a fixed income. It meant impossible. I called my son from the hospital parking lot. He answered on the second ring, voice bright and distracted, the way it always was when he was deep in something important, which was always. He'd built a software company in Austin. 50 employees, venture capital backing, his face on a regional business magazine cover last spring. I'd framed that cover and hung it in my study. I was proud of him. I told him so every chance I got. "Dad," he said, "hey, bad time." I told him about the diagnosis, the surgery timeline, the $3,200 copay. I kept my voice steady. 31 years in a classroom teaches you how to stay calm when you need to be heard. He was quiet for a moment. Then I heard voices in the background. A woman laughing, glasses clinking. "The thing is, Dad," he said, "we just closed our Series B, 12 million, but every dollar is already committed. Payroll, product development, new hires. We're onboarding next month. My investors have specific requirements about how capital gets deployed. I can't just pull money out for personal expenses right now." Personal expenses. I let that sit. "Look," he said, "I'll see what I can do after the quarter closes. Maybe a payment plan with the hospital?" "I need the surgery before the end of the month," I said quietly. "My oncologist says every week matters at this stage." A pause. Someone called his name in the background. He covered the phone, muttered something, then came back. "Dad, I really have to go. We're celebrating the funding round tonight. I'll call you tomorrow. We'll figure something out." The line went quiet. I sat in my car in that hospital lot for a long time. October sky gray and cold overhead. My phone rang. My daughter. She worked the morning shift at a nursing home in Columbus. 35. Divorced. Raising 2 kids on a certified nursing assistant's salary. She'd never hidden what she made, never been ashamed of honest work. "Dad," she said, "Billy Carson called me. He said you were at the oncology center today. Is it serious?" Billy Carson was a former student of mine, now working in radiology at the hospital. He'd always looked out for me. I told my daughter the same news, same calm voice. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, "How much?" $3,200. "I'm going to look into payment plans." "Don't you dare," she said, voice carrying that soft but absolute edge she'd inherited from her mother. "I'm coming over tonight. You have work in the morning." "Dad, don't." I drove home. The house felt quieter. I stood in the kitchen looking at the photo on the fridge, my son's magazine cover, framed, then moved when I ran out of wall space. And my daughter at her nursing certification ceremony, her kids on either side, all 3 grinning. I'd driven to Columbus for that ceremony, sat in the second row, applauded until my hands hurt. My daughter arrived at 7, still in her work uniform under her coat. She sat at my kitchen table, pulled an envelope from her purse, and set it between us. 3 years, she said. "I've been putting money aside since Connor was born. Emergency fund. For the roof or the car." She pushed the envelope toward me. "It's $2,000. I didn't touch it. That's your safety net. You're my father." She met my eyes. "I watched you work every summer so we could have school clothes. I watched you coach 40 kids every spring who weren't even yours. I watched you visit mom in hospice every single day for 11 months and still show up to teach the next morning." She swallowed hard. $2,000 is not a sacrifice compared to what you've given. Take it. I opened the envelope. $20 and $50 bills carefully folded. I could picture her counting it out, small amounts at a time. I can't accept this. Yes, you can. She put her hand over mine. You taught me family isn't a transaction. At Mom's funeral, you said, family isn't what you owe each other. It's what you choose to give. I remembered. I'd stood at that podium and believed those words completely. I still needed $200 more. The next day, I called a man named Gerald Hutchkins. He'd been principal at Jefferson High for 15 years, still called me every few months for lunch. He answered the phone like he'd been waiting for you to call. I told him about the diagnosis. He didn't let me finish. I'll make some calls. Give me 48 hours, Robert. Don't touch that phone until you hear from me. 2 days later, Billy Carson knocked on my front door, still wearing his hospital badge, carrying a white envelope. Inside was $400 in cash. A note in Gerald's handwriting. From the Jefferson family. No payback required. Just get better. 14 signatures below it. Teachers I'd worked with, 2 custodians, the school librarian, people on teacher and staff salaries, people with their own bills. They'd passed a hat and given without asking questions. My son had $12 million and couldn't spare $3,200. I called the hospital and scheduled the surgery. The surgery went well. Gerald drove me and sat in the waiting room 4 hours. My daughter took 3 unpaid days off and slept on my couch. My son sent a text. Heard the surgery went well. Thinking of you. That was all. I was recovering at home when the letter arrived. From a financial institution in Austin. Loan notification. My name on it. Robert E. Calloway, co-borrower. A business loan from 2021, $40,000 taken against a line of credit opened using my information. My social security number, my home address, my retired teacher's pension as collateral. I had never signed anything. I called Gerald first. Then I called a woman named Patricia Kwan. She'd been my student in 2003. Sharp, quiet, always sitting in the 3rd row. She was now a financial attorney in Cincinnati. She answered on the 2nd ring and said, Mr. Calloway, I was wondering when you'd call. 2 months earlier, Billy Carson had seen a credit flag during a routine insurance verification at the hospital. He'd recognized my name and called Patricia. She'd started looking into it before I even knew it existed. The loan was real. The signature on the application was close to mine. But Patricia's handwriting expert confirmed within 48 hours it didn't match county records. My son had opened a $40,000 business line of credit using my name and my pension as an asset. He'd defaulted. The default had been quietly sitting on my credit report, which was why my application for a home equity loan last winter had been declined. I'd assumed it was my age and income. It wasn't. Patricia asked what I wanted to do. Find everything, I said. She found more. My son's company was leveraged at a ratio that would have frightened any serious investor. The Series B was real but came with clawback provisions and performance benchmarks. His burn rate suggested missing revenue targets was likely. He wasn't celebrating, he was buying time. There was also a former business partner named David Okafor, co-founder. In 2020, with the company struggling, my son had restructured equity and pushed David out with a buyout offer made under threat of a manufactured lawsuit. David had fought, lost, and walked away with a fraction of what his shares would be worth today. Patricia found him still in Austin, working as a contractor, quiet but keeping everything, every email, contract, text message. I asked her to reach out. David called me on a Thursday afternoon. His voice was careful at first. Then he asked who I was. Your son told me once that you were the best man he knew, David said quietly. He said you taught him that your word was your bond. I hadn't called my son since the surgery text. He'd tried twice in 3 weeks, left short voicemails. I was waiting. Patricia had identified a path, liability for the fraudulent loan, grounds for civil case from David, combined documentation offering significant leverage. Not just leverage, a choice. I called Gerald and asked him to arrange a gathering. Jefferson High Library on a Saturday evening. How many people? Everyone who signed that envelope. Then I called my daughter. Dad, what's happening? I need you there Saturday. Bring the kids. A pause. This is about your brother, isn't it? Yes. I'll be there. I called David. He drove 12 hours from Austin, arrived Friday night, slept on my couch, ate eggs with me Saturday morning, and said, "Whatever you need, Mr. Calloway, I trust you." I called my son Saturday afternoon. Calm, direct. "I need you in Dayton tomorrow morning." "Dad, I'm in the middle of a product sprint. We have a launch in 3 weeks. I know this is more important." He heard something in my tone. "Is everything okay? Are you okay?" Jefferson High Library, Sunday at 10. Come alone. "Dad, what is this about?" "It's about what family actually means. I'll see you tomorrow." He arrived 15 minutes late. The library was Sunday quiet. Gerald had arranged chairs in a wide circle, like for Socratic seminars. 14 people were already seated when my son walked in. Teachers, staff, Billy Carson in his hospital badge, Patricia with her briefcase, David Okafor sitting with his hands folded watching the door. My son stopped 3 steps inside. He wore a fleece with his company logo. He looked at the faces, then at me, then back. "Dad, what is this?" "Sit down," I said. He sat. The chair next to David was the only empty one. He didn't recognize David at first. It had been 5 years. Then David looked at him. And my son went very still. Gerald spoke first, his voice filling the room. "We're here because a good man needed help. Robert Calloway spent 31 years in this school, coached baseball, tutored weekends, drove students to college visits. He raised 2 children alone after losing his wife. He never once asked for anything he didn't earn. 6 weeks ago, Robert was diagnosed with cancer. He needed $3,200 for a surgical copay. He called his son. His son was celebrating $12 million in venture capital funding, and he told his father he'd look into it after the quarter closed." A sound moved through the room. Not loud, just present. Patricia stood. She set a document on the small table in the center of the circle. "My name is Patricia Kwan. I was Mr. Calloway's student in 2003. She looked at my son. "I've spent the last 2 weeks reviewing your financial records, your company's loan history, and a specific credit application from 2021. She walked through it methodically. The loan, the forged signature, the credit flag that had quietly destroyed my borrowing ability for 2 years. She set each document on the table as she spoke, building a clean, organized stack. "I never authorized that loan," I said. "I never signed that application. I never knew that debt existed until a former student spotted it in my medical records." My son opened his mouth, then closed it. David Okafor spoke next. He didn't raise his voice. He described building the company together, the sleepless months, the growth they'd both sacrificed for. He described the moment my son's lawyers arrived with a restructured equity agreement, the threat of a lawsuit he couldn't afford to fight. "I had a daughter starting kindergarten," David said. "I couldn't fight, so I signed. You knew exactly what you were doing." My daughter stood, still in her work clothes from her morning shift. She didn't have notes. "When Dad was recovering from surgery," she said, "I took 3 days off without pay. I drove from Columbus at 5 in the morning so he wouldn't wake up alone." She held up her phone, banking app open. $2,000, 3 years of putting aside whatever I could. That's what I gave him. She looked at her brother. "You sent a text message." The room was completely quiet. I stood. "I'm not here to destroy you," I said. "I want to be clear about that. What I am here to do is make sure you understand what your choices have cost other people." I walked to the table and picked up the loan document. "You forged my name to borrow $40,000. That loan has been defaulted for 2 years. My credit is damaged. I was denied a home equity loan I needed for emergency repairs last winter. You knew that was there. You never told me." My son didn't respond. "David Okafor lost years of his life's work because you manufactured a legal threat you knew he couldn't afford to fight. He had a 5-year-old daughter. He had a mortgage. You used that against him. You had 12 million in your bank account when I called you about my surgery. You told me it was a personal expense you couldn't accommodate. 6 days later, I went into surgery with money raised by retired teachers and a school librarian and a former student who recognized my name in a credit file. The room held its breath. I have two options in front of me, I said. Patricia has documented everything. The loan fraud creates significant personal liability. If we proceed, it becomes public record. Every investor in your Series B will see it. My son looked up. His eyes were red. Or, I said, we resolve this here in this room with these witnesses. Option 1. You reinstate David Okafor's original equity stake. Full restoration, no conditions, original percentage calculated at current company valuation. He becomes what he should have always been, a co-founder with full standing. David made a quiet, involuntary sound. You also establish the Margaret Callaway Education Fund, named for your mother, at $10,000 annually, permanent, managed by Jefferson High, for students who can't afford college application fees, testing costs, the small expenses that stop working-class kids from getting where they're trying to go. And you resign as sole signatory on all company financial instruments for 1 year. David and an independent financial oversight officer will co-sign every expenditure above $25,000. You will operate transparently, no exceptions. My son's voice was barely a whisper. And option 2? Patricia answered. Option 2 is that we file the civil complaint Monday morning. The loan fraud goes to the state attorney's office, the David Okafor matter goes to civil court, and every document in this folder becomes public record. The clock on the library wall ticked. My son looked at David for a long moment. David looked back without looking away. You have 24 hours, I said. My son stood slowly. He looked older than when he'd walked in. The fleece with the company logo seemed wrong on him now. He looked at the teachers who'd given money they didn't have. He looked at Patricia, who'd given her time because 30 years ago I'd given her mine. He looked at his sister, watching him with something sadder than anger. He walked out without saying anything. The room exhaled. My daughter came and stood beside me. David sat very still with his eyes closed. Father Michaels from St. Anthony's, sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. Robert, you gave him a door. That's more than most people would have offered. I didn't do it for him, I said. I did it for everyone in this room. They deserve to see that what happened to them mattered, that kindness isn't weakness and cruelty isn't cleverness. My daughter took my hand and squeezed it the way she had when she was 8 years old and her mother was sick and she didn't know how to say she was scared. My son called at 11:47 that night. I answered and waited. His voice was different. Quieter, the polished confidence gone. What came through instead was younger, reminding me of a boy who used to sit at this kitchen table doing homework while I graded papers. I'm sorry, he said. Not sorry I got caught. I know you know the difference. I'm sorry for what I did, for all of it. I told myself the loan was temporary, that I'd pay it off before you noticed. I told myself David would be fine. I told myself you were strong and you'd figure out the medical bills. Every single time I lied to someone, I told myself a story that made it acceptable. I ran out of stories tonight. I want to take option 1. I want David back in the company. I want the fund. I want to do it right. But I need to ask you something. Was there ever a moment when you stopped believing I could be better than this? I thought about the magazine cover I'd framed, driving him to college orientation, the years I'd told people about my son, the entrepreneur. No, I said. That's why we're having this conversation instead of a different one. He was quiet for a while. I'll be there Monday morning, he said finally. Gerald's office, whatever time. I want David there. I want you there. I want to do it in front of people, not just lawyers. Monday, I said, 9 o'clock. Dad, I'm here. Thank you for not giving up on me. I didn't do it for you, I said again. But I'm glad you're choosing this. Monday morning, Gerald's office was crowded. My son was already there, standing by the window in a plain gray shirt, no company logo. David sat across from Patricia. My daughter was there with her youngest. Billy Carson had come before his shift. Several teachers from Saturday waited in the hallway. Patricia walked through the documents one at a time. My son signed each without hesitation. When he slid the equity restoration agreement to David, he said, "I should have done this differently from the beginning. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me work beside you honestly this time." David looked at him for a long moment, then picked up the pen. The Margaret Calloway Education Fund documents were last. My son signed his name, set down the pen, and looked at the framed photograph on Gerald's wall. A JV baseball team photo. I was in the back row, hands on the shoulders of two players whose names I still remembered. "I coached under you for 2 seasons," Gerald said, "before I moved into administration. Your father ran the quietest practices I ever saw. No yelling. Just high expectations and enough patience to wait for people to meet them." My son looked at me. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. Some moments are complete without words. Chemotherapy teaches you which hours of the day belong to you and which don't. It teaches you who calls and who doesn't. Gerald drove me to treatment twice a week, rotating with Billy Carson and 2 former students. My daughter drove from Columbus every Friday evening and stayed through Sunday. My son came every 3rd week. Not always. His company still needed him. But when he came without his phone in his hand. We talked, or we didn't. Sometimes we watched old baseball games on his laptop. Once he brought my granddaughter, age 3, who had never spent more than a holiday weekend with me. She fell asleep against my arm during the 3rd hour of treatment, and I sat very still so I wouldn't wake her. David's return to the company was not seamless. Rebuilding something broken rarely is, but David called me one evening in February and said, "He's trying, Mr. Calloway. He's not perfect, but he's trying in good faith." That's more than I had before. The Margaret Calloway Education Fund made its first grants in the spring. 6 students. Gerald sent me a photo of the check presentation. I wasn't well enough to attend, but I looked at that photo for a long time. My wife had been a teacher too, 4th grade. She used to say that the only thing that outlasts a life is what you put into other people, not money. Time and attention and the willingness to stay when it's inconvenient. That summer, the Saturday before the 4th of July, my son came to my house and helped me fix the section of back fence that had been leaning since fall. We worked for 3 hours without talking about anything that had happened. We talked about the fence. A baseball player we both liked. His daughter's new habit of narrating everything she saw out loud. When we were done, we sat on the back steps and drank iced tea. "I have a question," he said. "How do I become someone you'd be proud of again?" I thought about 31 years of students, the ones who'd struggled and grown and failed and tried again. "You don't do it all at once," I said. "You do it one day at a time. You show up when it's inconvenient. You tell the truth when a lie would be easier. You choose people over appearances. That's it. That's the whole thing." He was quiet. "It sounds simple." "It is simple," I said. "It's just not easy." He nodded. The evening light came through the maple tree and moved across the yard the same way it always had. The same yard where he'd learned to throw a curveball at 9. Different people, or maybe the same people choosing to become different. I didn't know yet if we'd fully find our way back. Some damage takes years to repair, and some never fully disappears. But I knew something I hadn't known with certainty in a long time. My son was trying. My daughter had never stopped. The people who signed that envelope had reminded me what community actually looks like when it isn't convenient. And I was still here, still sitting in my backyard in July, still breathing, still watching the light come through the trees. That's enough to build on. That's always been enough.